Ladies and gentlemen, our first question will be Christy. Christy, and this is for the panel, has Bermuda done enough to shape future leaders in Bermuda to take their rightful place? In 2015, do you believe Bermuda has done enough to shape a cadre of the capable, the competent, and the prepared to take their place in Bermuda for 2015 and beyond?
Thanks. So I think there have been a lot of efforts across Bermuda, including in organizations, and then also if you look at a national level. But I always think more can be done. And one thing that came up as a theme when we were originally discussing this panel was just the aging baby boomer generation. And with this exodus of one of the largest generations from the workforce, we're looking at a huge skills gap. And that's not just unique to Bermuda. In my work with clients in Bermuda and then also globally, this skills gap is very pervasive, and there have been a lot of recent studies around how prepared future leaders are. So I do think more can be done, and there's two main areas I think that this can happen in. One is in bridging the education to employment gap. So I myself am from a liberal arts background, and I really believe in the value of higher education, but I also believe that a lot of people don't come fully prepared to go into the workforce with the skill sets and the practical skill sets they need to thrive there. So how do we bridge that education to employment gap is one critical question, so that we set people up for success with these really tactical skill sets from the time they enter. The other piece is once you're within the workforce, we've got this amazing baby boomer generation that has institutional knowledge and historical knowledge from generations of work that are now exiting the workforce. And without proper knowledge transfer strategies, succession strategies, people from my generation aren't necessarily reaping the rewards of earning from those lessons learned, really understanding what these baby boomers have learned throughout their careers. So the more we can facilitate multi-generational management, I think the better within the workforce.
Thank you. Mr. Riley?
Yes. I think the question was, have we done enough to prepare leaders, something along those lines? I'm not sure if we've done sufficiently enough. And it also depends on which angle you're coming from, whether it's the business field, whether it's the religious field, whether it's political field. Certainly in the business environment, you do have a tendency when it comes for immediate succession that is not always in place, that those who are holding positions are sometimes fearful of those beneath them. And so I think that's one of the issues that we see certainly in the workplace. But there are some programs that are out there that are preparing people. I think also the individual has to also recognize themselves as a potential leader and also look for the training themselves. Thank you.
Guys, you're going to have to speak into the mic a little closer. Reverend Tweed?
Good evening. I think that it is somewhat of a misnomer in the sense that, to the best of my knowledge, it is not the case that in Bermuda you have countless unfilled jobs because there are persons who are not qualified to fill those jobs. Part of the challenge in Bermuda is that there are not jobs. The other issue in my initial response would be that having the presence of a token number of persons of color or persons of diverse gender backgrounds, presence does not necessarily, is not equivalent to progress, so that there are still institutional barriers that siphon out and prevent particular kinds of persons from taking advantage of opportunities in particular kinds of environments. And so I think that if you look at the condition of your average boardroom, the fact that we're having this conversation tonight is a testament that there is still an enormous amount of work to be done in terms of diversifying executive boardrooms and other areas in the workforce and diversifying the economy.
Thank you. Jason?
Good evening. Has Bermuda done enough? To me, the answer is simply no. We haven't done enough to groom, develop, and push leaders in this particular generation. It comes down to persons having the ability and willingness to lead. The ability to lead is one where persons need that external assistance, that direct development. Also, persons have to look within themselves and be honest with themselves in terms of, do they possess the skill sets to effectively lead in these times? The second is willingness, and that comes more intrinsically with an individual in terms of their confidence. A lot of persons who have ability don't have the willingness, and I don't think society pushes persons who have the ability enough so that they begin to develop the willingness. It's this thing where we call persons are still have a fear to fail. Once that fear to failure is removed, I think persons will be more willing to stand up and be accountable. Additionally, persons don't trust in their own abilities at times. And they don't trust in their own abilities because the world can be harsh and cruel to those individuals. When you get in a position of leadership and you may buckle under pressure one day, the bloggers in Bermuda, the society, it don't ease you up. As a result of a combination of and a mixture of all that, I don't think that we actively push to develop leaders. I believe that there are training programs. We send persons on training programs, but it's this thing out there where persons need to wait your turn and wait your space, and I'll direct you and tell you when it's your time to lead, rather than persons stepping up and just taking the rightful place.
Thank you.
Good evening all. One of the things I would like to highlight is that, is there opportunity? Yes, there is opportunity. Is there enough opportunity? My gut tells me no, but it's a very difficult thing to quantify. With opportunity, I think the other component that we need to look at is exposure. If you give a young man, 14, 15, 16-year-old, a choice of what it is that he wants to do when he grows up, he will choose one of the things that he knows. So if it's 3 things that he knows, he'll make a choice of one of those 3 things. If he was exposed to 10 things, what would he choose? Who knows, right? But the choices become pretty exciting after that. And one of the things that I'm quite passionate about is exposing specifically our young men and also our young women to what opportunities are available to them, because at least if they know, they can make an educated choice. The other thing that I would like to speak to is this aspect of soft skills. So we could come to, the industry, whatever industry you choose to be in, and we have a shiny, spanky new degree from the university, but we don't necessarily know how we ought to maneuver in those environments. And those are what I refer to as the soft skills. And not all the time that teaching is readily available for our young people. So what you find is specifically in my industry, which is insurance and reinsurance, you tend to reach out to someone who you identify with, who can help you to maneuver through this industry, because it's not always a straightforward path. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And so, if there's 2 things that I like to highlight with the opportunity, one would be exposure to our young people and the accompanying soft skills that go with that.
Thank you. To the speakers, we're going to ask you if you can put your mouth a little closer to the mic, as the people in the back are having trouble hearing us, and also if we can keep our comments as close to 2 minutes as possible so we can get through the round.
Good evening. So I can be brief because I agree with a lot of what I've already heard. The way that I look at developing our future is in 3 respects. One, especially from the business context, recruitment, and empowering young people to ensure they have the correct skills and educational training in order to enter what we call the pipeline in our place of work. Because we can't replace our leaders if there's no talent in the pipeline. So recruitment and making sure there are people who are eligible for recruitment and entering the pipeline is important. Retention is important as well. There's no use getting bodies in the door if, for whatever reason, we can't keep talent and the talent leaves, because if the talent leaves, then they don't replace the leadership when it retires. And as part of retention, the third thing that I think about is, and I like the way that Jason put that, giving people the ability to learn and to make mistakes and to fail. Because I don't know of any leader who was a perfectionist from day one. And part of developing leadership skills is being able to try something, fail at it, and then try again and learn from your mistakes.
Good evening, everyone. Similarly to Chen, a lot of what I was going to convey has already been expressed, but I think when you hear the question, has enough been done, it implies a one-way street, that the onus is on the current leaders assuming or occupying those respective positions of leadership. And I think as young leaders who are looking to emerge, we also have to make our intention to and willingness and desire to serve and lead known, because if you don't make that intention known, the current leaders may not know of your desire to serve. And so I think providing those opportunities for young leaders is important, but we also have an onus on ourselves as emerging leaders to ensure that enough is being done so that we can in due course assume those roles of leadership. I agree, developing soft skills, providing opportunities, but before we even get to that point, we have to make our intentions known if leadership is something one aspires to.
Hi, good evening. I think I'll also echo what's been said before me, but to add to that, I think what often happens is that when we have roles open at senior levels in an organization, we look around and we say, who do we have who can fill this role? And we sort of look at who's there and we say, well, you know, we've got to go with this guy or that guy because that's all we've got. Because at that point, it's really too late to develop leaders. I think we need to develop leaders the whole time, through their whole career, through the whole talent pipeline. We call it the same thing. So from the time you enter an organization until the time you become a CEO, and even as a CEO, I think you still need development and coaching. I think this is something that organizations really need to drive through the whole careers of their people, and not wait until the point where they have an opening for a CEO and say, who do we have, who's available? I think that's a really surefire way of getting the same type of people over and over again. You won't get diverse leadership if you just wait and see who's there, because who's going to bubble up to the top is probably the same people over and over again. So if you do want diversity in your leadership, in your organization, I think it's really important that you develop diversity within your organization the whole way, from entry level all the way up to the CEO and the board, and you have to do it proactively. You can't just sit there and wait and see who's going to show up.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Apologies for my tardiness, but glad to be here. I'm going to speak this evening from all of my own experiences. I've done no kind of research in regards to what's a great leader, et cetera, but my own experiences and kind of seeing what works or what I think works. And I think one of the kind of traits of a good leader is actually kind of making themselves almost invisible. So we should always, as great leaders, kind of be looking to see who's the next person coming up and making sure that they have been engaged and they have been empowered to actually take on more responsibility and keep on going and eventually take over leadership positions. I think we're all leaders in our own rights, but there's a time and a place for actually having the CEO or the premier job, whatever the case might be, as a leader. I think to answer the question in regards to have we as a community done enough to develop leaders, I would like to take a bit of a different tack and kind of say, as a community, we need to support our leaders, we need to respect our leaders, and I think we don't have enough of a mature conversation in Bermuda in regards to leadership and what really, really matters. So when we should hold our leaders accountable as a community, and we should also, again, give constructive feedback to those leaders so they continue to improve as well. So as a community, I think we can kind of continue to develop leaders and bring them forth, but it's actually having the right conversation with those individuals and helping them to develop. And so I think that will make a big difference in our leadership pool as we go forward.